Thank you for joining us for Talk with Impact. My name is Kitty Ambers, and I have the honor of serving as president of GFWC Impact. Individuals Making Progress Across Communities Together is organized as part of the General Federation of Women's Clubs. We are a nonprofit, non-sectarian, non-discriminatory, and nonpartisan group. Our focus is on efforts and activities that support two key principles of GFWC: living the volunteer spirit and unity in diversity. Through our Talk with Impact initiative, we are engaging in constructive and informative conversation on today's issues. Our goal is to encourage a factual understanding of the history and evolution of various social and cultural concerns. To learn more, visit GFWC Impact on Facebook.
And it is my great privilege to introduce our guest speaker this evening. Dawn Taylor was born and raised in Selbyville, Delaware. She and I actually grew up together, woohoo! And in fact, I think we cheered together from middle school all the way through high school. So super fun, and we've had a lot of really interesting chats getting ready for this event about how we grew up and, you know, how the world is different than our little town we grew up in. But Dawn went on from Selbyville to go to Salisbury State University, where she graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Psychology. Then she moved on to Washington, D.C., where she founded Pinnacle Talent Acquisition and PTA HR, which is a minority-owned human resource consulting practice. She was named Woman Entrepreneur of the Year by the Maryland Women in Business Center and the Maryland Chamber of Commerce in 2017. And I could absolutely go on and on about her accomplishments, but I know that Dawn will be weaving her experience in human relations, human resource development, training, and consulting throughout our conversation this evening. So I don't want to give away too much too soon. But I would be completely remiss if I didn't give a big shout out to her most recent accolade. And Dawn, I'm going to show it here. So she was featured on the front of CEO magazine recently, September edition. So great story in there. We'll post this in the chat if anybody wants to see the details of both of these, but super great feature, and it's so great to have Dawn Taylor with us as one of the top 20 dynamic CEOs of 2020 in the United States. So you guys are in for a treat tonight. Dawn, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us. And you know, let's get going. Give us a little bit of your background, and then we'll jump into some questions on our topic for tonight.
Well, as Kitty said, Kitty and I have known each other since we were in, I don't know, I mean, we were in like grade school together. We didn't go, I think from the time that we could like go to the bathrooms by ourselves, we knew each other. So we have known each other our entire lives, and I'm just so happy to be able to spend this time with you. I got into this line of work. It's a great story, and I will tell this story. So when we talk about biases, I was young in my career. I was working for a consulting firm in Washington, D.C., and I was working with the COO of Gannett USA Today. And if anybody is old enough to remember, they were the powerhouse of the media and the news industry back in the 90s and the early 2000s. And I was staffing his media people, I was staffing his administrative people, and we had a great relationship over the phone. If you know, back in the 90s, we did not have Zoom or Skype or Slack or any of these things that would allow you to see who you're speaking to. And so he called one day and he needed a right hand to himself. And he said, "Dawn, you know me so well, I need a you or a me." And I said, "Okay, I'm not a you or a me. Well, tell me a little bit about what that means." And he said, I need a white woman and she has to be a size 6 to a size something and blonde hair. And I'm looking at myself saying, I'm the total opposite of all of that. So I said, you know what? You and I finally need to meet. So I go to his office, big hair and all, big curly hair and all, dark skin and all. And I sit in the lobby and I give my name, Dawn Taylor. And the person that was walking out, I thought it was him, but I wasn't sure. So I didn't want to say, hey, are you? The receptionist was sitting there. But when he walked out, he only peeked out and went back. And the fifth time he peeked out, he did go to the receptionist and say, if Dawn Taylor shows up, she is an hour late. My time is valuable. I won't see her. And the receptionist said, oh, Dawn Taylor, she's sitting right there. And if I could tell you the look on his face, I thought he was going to have a heart attack. I swear. I'm a big jokester, but I don't know. I was 20 anything, but anyway. And I just got up and shook his hand and I went in and I said, why did you think I was white? I just had to know. And he's like, well, in my mind, when I hear a voice, I come up with a visual. And you're nothing like the visual. And we're still friends to this day. But that was my first probably experience with bias. And so from that day, I have been on a education and a coaching and really trying to help people understand biases and how they don't have to be bad, but we all have them. We all have them. Anybody have any kind of experiences that you'd like to share?
Well, you mentioned your own, personal experience with that, and we talked about the voice. So I know one of the things we kind of wanted to get into was around what are some of the most common misconceptions that we run across from a biased perspective. The voice and the visual connection, because I think we all do that. We all have an idea of what the other person on the other end of the phone looks. Now we get to see them so often.
The biggest misconception of bias is it's only about race and gender. Biases, I just gave you two that have nothing to do with race or gender. It was my voice, right? And he talked about weight. There's political biases. I mean, somebody can say they're one or the other and you're already thinking that they're this type of person. Eye color, hair color, you hear, again, that was another bias. If you're blonde, you look a certain way. If you are a redhead, you're a certain way. So there are plenty of biases out here to go around. Again, they're all not bad and they all are not around race and gender. The second misconception is if you say bias, that means you dislike a certain group. That doesn't mean that. It may be the other way where you like a certain thing. Like, for example, the example I gave you, in his mind, once we had, we started to really start to meet and like have conversations, his grandmother, who he loved dearly, looked a certain way. And that's why his bias was around what this person should look like. So again, the biggest misconception is all biases aren't bad. That's the biggest misconception. This is one that I have had to, I've had to challenge myself with people with this third misconception that I'll give you. If I keep my biases in check and I become an ally or a friend to the person I have the biases or the group I have a bias against, I'm okay. Well, no. I may, hang out with people that are white people. if I have a bias around them, because I hang out with them, doesn't mean that bias has gone away. There needs to be some tearing down and rebuilding of why you have that bias in the first place before you can absolutely say, you know what, it's not about the bias, it's about how you think about it, and in turn, how you act toward that bias, if that makes sense.
So can you give us some sort of a contextual example, especially with things that are going on in society today?
Okay. You are a white woman, you're walking down the street, you're in the inner city of, I don't know, any inner city, you're on Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue, and you see 3 Black men coming toward you. It is dusk, and you immediately get a rise. You may clutch your purse, you may get on the other side of the sidewalk, you may get on your phone and act like you're either calling the police or you're talking to someone, but you have a fear. So that is a real life scenario that happens. I can't even tell you. I live close to Washington, D.C., worked in Washington, D.C. for a long period of time. I saw that happen all the time. All the time. Another one is if you dress a certain way. I have been I've been in my my genre my entire career, and I've always dealt with the IBMers. I've dealt with a lot of older white men, and their perception of me is that I am exotic. That means I am, I mean, one of them said, that I probably have experienced more things sexually than other people. And, it's, oh, I've had it said to me. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So.
I mean, yeah. So, those, or really beautiful people that can't be smart. So if you're really pretty, you're dumb. Which is absolutely not the case. I mean, and so those are some of the biases that are real, that are happening today all day long.
So when we think about that, and obviously our goal is to try to understand it and get past it, or set a better example, or whether it's in the workplace, whether it's home, whether it's raising children, grandchildren, what are some constructive ways to call it out, have the conversation, and just kind of try and coach the other person? I mean, you mentioned saying nothing, because we've all, I think, figured out that that's really not a good solution. So coach us a little bit on how to identify our own, and how do we address it among our friends and family and peers and all of that.
Well, first you have to address it among yourself. First, you must identify and be honest with yourself. You know how you feel when you're around a certain group of people, or if you're talking to your friends are talking about a certain group of people or a certain type of person. Inwardly how that makes you feel. A lot of us ignore it. The way you start to recognize biases is recognizing them inside of yourself. And what I won't do, I won't put you guys on display tonight. I love doing that, by the way. I won't put you on display, but most of us have a few biases that we've always had our whole life. Our whole life. I mean, there are some that you look at an overweight person and you immediately think they're not healthy. Not true. Or a thin person, totally healthy. Not true. Not true. So in order to teach, you must understand yourself. You got to understand you. Once you do that, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, Michael makes a really good point. How do we know what's conscious and what's really unconscious bias?
That's a really good question. And okay, so we know what conscious is, right? We know that we're thinking it. It's probably wrong, but we're doing it anyway. That's a conscious bias. That's a conscious anything. So I am thinking that this Black man with, a hoodie on is dangerous. I'm thinking it. I want to think it. I want to believe it. And now I am going to act out on what I think. I'm going to be afraid. I'm going to maybe jump the gun and shoot or protect myself when there was no harm around that. That's a conscious bias. I want to dislike all Black people because what I was taught was whatever. That's a conscious bias. An unconscious bias is, why am I afraid of that? I mean, why did that, when he stood near me, I got weird. Why did I get weird? Why did I get weird? I mean, Kitty, you and I talked about this, and you were like, I'm married to an African-American man, and I have biases, and I'm sure yours are mainly unconscious, right? So an unconscious bias is you can't figure it out. You don't know why. You just feel. Remember, your conscious state is a feeling.
So does it kind of transition though sometimes? Because I know, we all are a product of our environment, right? And so
Okay.
does that sort of result in the unconscious bias? To your point of anyone overweight can't be healthy, and those sorts of things. I had to laugh if any of you have read the book White Fragility. There's some really funny stories in there about talking about bias, and and one of them had to do with, well, I'm not biased, I'm a vegetarian. And it was like, what does that have to do with anything? But just these feelings that, well, I can't possibly be biased. I have Black friends, so I can't be biased. I have Jewish friends.
That's the one. I have friends.
Yeah.
I have Black friends, I have Jewish friends, I have Christian friends, but how can I be biased? Well, yeah, it's not so much about who you surround yourself with. It is when you are behind closed doors, how are you feeling? If it's not these people that you've chosen that maybe you're comfortable with, how are you treating the others? A stranger, a person in the supermarket at 11 o'clock at night at the gas station. Like, how are you feeling about those people? So that is again, difference between unconscious is consciousness is a feeling. We all have the hairs that go up on our neck when we're somewhere doing something and we don't know why. We've all felt it. Or our heart races just a little bit faster. Or someone says something and it angers us or frustrates us. Why? That's your unconscious bias. Your conscious is, I've chosen to feel negatively about a person, a group, or a platform.
So from an inclusion standpoint and, celebrating diversity rather than having a bias to someone that's different than us or a group that's different than us, what's a good approach? When you're coaching kind of your workplace folks, I know you have some stats around that. What do you see makes the most impact in moving an organization or a culture forward effectively?
Anything fun. No, seriously, putting together a calendar, a holiday calendar, and celebrating everybody's holidays. I have a client now who each holiday you have to bring in the foods from your ethnic background, which is always fun, and you get to talk about it and the origins of the food. There, I had a client do a fashion show that everyone had to dress up in their native garb, and they were able to walk this catwalk. That definitely came from me. I created this. I love runways. And they had to walk in their native garb, and I had to, when they walked, I talked about where this was from, how it was made, a little bit about the history of their ancestors and things like that. It's so much fun.
So from an education perspective.
Correct.
Yeah, and enjoying it. Yeah.
You can have, I call them rap sessions, where you get a few people in the room and the topic is origin. And everybody gets to talk about their origin and what makes their origin so unique and so special. You can get really fun and have people swap origins. So you have to study mine, I would have to study yours, and then you would have to come and present. I mean, there's a million ways to make this fun, to make this educational. And what you want it to do is you want it to resonate. Yes, we come from very different ends of the earth, some of us, but we are the same. We are human beings, and because we are not alike, that makes us just that more fun, enjoyable, mysterious. You have to take that negative spin and that fear out of it. And those are some of the types of ways to do that. What I want to go over very quickly, though, is I want everyone to understand the 12 types of biases that are wreaking havoc on us in our workplaces and in our lives right now. And I'm just going to go through these really quickly because I can't believe this, 7:24, this goes by very fast. Affinity bias, and everybody knows what having affinity to something is. It is having people that look like you. I have a client that I swear I walk in and it's like I'm looking at the same person 25 different times. They look it's what this man asked me for. They look exactly the same. And fearful to have anyone look a little bit different. I don't know. And really the director said, this is just what this is what works for us. And I'm like, but that's a look. So
Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders come to mind.
Absolutely, cowboy cheerleaders, or the back in the day, the flight attendants. They
Sure.
look the same. They look the same.
Yep, good point.
Conformity bias. People who act similar. So not only do they look similar, they act similar. When that comes to me, I think about Valley Girls. How they talked, how they walked, it's just that their hair looked the same, they talked the same, they had the same way of being. It is, I'm conforming. I'm going to conform to fit in, which is very difficult for people who there's no way they could. I mean, can you imagine me as a Valley girl? I personally cannot. That I would never fit in.
Like, wow.
The halo effect. They have halo and horns. So the halo effect is, this is about hiring. And this is, you come from, everybody from Brown is amazing. If you come from Brown, Harvard, Vassar, Yale, awesome. If you come from any other school, you're not going to be good. You're never going to work. It doesn't matter how many degrees you have. It doesn't matter. These schools produce what we need. Horns of fuck is just the opposite. It is you are hiring, you're hiring people because so it's just the opposite. You're a Howard, or your address is Martin Luther King Jr. You can't be that smart, even if you went to Brown. You live on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. We all know that only the poor people who are on assistance and live there. So you did something wrong because you're living there. So that's the Horns effect. We all know gender bias. I mean, we as women, we feel it every day. Ageism. Ageism is ranked #1 right now in biases. We are an older generation. We're living longer. We're working longer. And so ageism is one that is, I mean, it is a fight for me every day, because everything we do in a recruiting perspective, you can tell someone's age. If you have history on your resume that goes back past 2000, people know how old you are. You know, you have to give your social security card. You have to do all these things that will tell your age. So fighting ageism is one of the biggest things, and one of the biggest platforms I'm standing on right now. And I am proposing that we stop putting, how you got it. So Gwen is asking, how would you stop ageism in the workplace? Got it. I'm going to give you 3 things that I'm working on right now. 1, your recruitment. This all starts with recruitment. Stop putting the date you got out of college. We should not have to ask on a job application. You can put the day and the month. You should not have to put your year. What do we need that for? We don't need that for anything. When you're in the workplace, a good workplace will start to have programs that support your aged workers. They will start to have inclusive activities that support workers that are of and going into a certain age. And I'm hoping that in the next 2 years, I can get that to be a bit more commonplace, because it's terrible right now.
Programs to support aged workers, are we talking, adoption of technology? Are we talking health and wellness type things? What sort of examples?
No. So not health and wellness, because one of my recruiters said, we hear it all the time. I mean, age to most companies means higher premiums on their benefits.
Ah, gotcha.
So it does. And so they won't hire you. Again, the bias is, if you're at a certain age, you're not healthy, don't be, please don't be older and overweight. I mean, oh my God, that's just terrible. And I've had clients say to me, love them, but we're already at the threshold for whatever with our, the benefits. And if we do this, and this is going to send our benefit, sky high. That's a problem.
Yeah. One question I want to backtrack just a moment from the bias perspective. Give us an example of beauty bias. So I guess is that similar to an affinity bias that, they've all got to be pretty people?
Yeah. I mean, when you have employers hire you because you're thin, you're pretty, You will, I mean, I've had clients to say, we're a sales, you know, we get our business from closing deals. So we need to have someone that is attractive with us on these deals. It just makes them close easier. You're just like, the thing, I should write a book actually, and it would either be a comedy or a tragedy, and we would all just cry, because the things I've heard over the years are absolutely ridiculous. But that's a beauty bias. You know, your stewardesses, probably back in the 70s and 60s, they got weighed, literally weighed on a scale. And you couldn't work if you had blemishes on your face, if you had bags under your eyes. You had to be pretty. So that's the beautiful one.
Beauty.
Unfortunately, everyone is not built to be small, and we all still should have the same rights as everyone else. The next one is name bias, and this one, you know, my late mother, Kitty knew my late mother. I asked my mom, I'm like, we have such boring names. There's Dawn, there's Darren, there's Faye, there's Alan. She's like, I never want someone to look at your name on a resume and turn you down because of your name. And okay, when you're like 13 and you want a cool name, that just didn't make any sense to me. It absolutely makes sense to me now. Discrimination because of a name happens so much, especially after, well, it happened, it's always happened, but after 9/11, anybody with an Arabic name was in the trash so fast, you couldn't, I mean, you were never looked at, ever, to the point where I had some candidates say that they would take on a different name just to get in front of a client. And it's sad when you have to lie about your name to get a job, or to say, you know, to fit in, or to have friends, or to not be beat up, or it's awful.
Does it happen at a young age? Like, I'm thinking about school teachers, and, you know, when they see their role for the year, or they're welcoming their students for the first time, is there
Martisha says she's been there. Yeah, Martisha would probably get it.
Okay. Yep.
Does it happen at an early? I think it does. I think that children won't recognize it. Most of the time when I talk to or I coach individuals, they don't recognize this until they start out in the working world. I mean, you got to think about it. You don't really have to worry about it while you're in college. I mean, people, you know, you're all in school, so it's really when you are up against, you know, Jane and Jan and Jim and Sally, and then you are Khalif Oldabi, that comes into play. That also hinders not only just getting the job, but how much they pay you. I've seen compensation bands where you have minorities being paid exponentially lower than their white counterparts. The job offers are so much lower than their white counterparts. So it all goes into bias. And I go around to companies and I ask, you know, once I find this, I want to know why. Why? How is this woven into the fabric of your culture? Why? And the answers have ranged from, this is just how we've always done it, to, wow, I didn't even recognize it, we got to change it, to to just me fighting for my life and the welfare of other people, how wrong this is. So those are the major biases that are happening in today's culture. Any questions, anyone?
I'm watching here. Yep. Rebecca is involved in the school. She says in school it's a last name bias. Teacher, I've got another Amber's on my roll this year. The next sentence is either great, I love that family, or yikes, mom is crazy. So yeah, I think we see that a lot. And like you said, I don't think the kids see it. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. You know, the kids,
Not at
it's
that
just their
age.
friends, right? And
Right.
unless it's a conscious bias they've been taught at home, is I guess the full circle I might make on that opening comment from of your opening conversation definition.
So I would like to hear from the group, since we've talked about biases, what do you guys feel you may have been taught, or do you have any biases that you want to talk about?
I have a text message from somebody who's not able to Zoom with us. We recognize them. We get that, grab my handbag, cross the street, that kind of thing. But what do we do about them? What are some actions we can personally take to improve?
Well, again, biases come from the conscious mind. So this is, I'll put my psychology hat on now. When you feel a certain way about a situation, biases are fear, right? How do you get rid of fear? How do you break that cycle of fear? You have to inject yourself in your own bias. You grab your purse when you see a Black man crossing the street. The next time, don't cross the street. Say hello. The next time you see a Black man, it's dusk, and you cross the street, and you've done this. Now just really take a look at and take a feel of how you feel after you did that and nothing happened. Biases are not a group thing. Biases is an individual thing that a bias will find a bias in their communication. So I can teach all day long what the biases are, areas that you can improve and make people comfortable, and maybe you can learn about another culture. But if you're not willing to look at yourself and say, I know that when I'm on an elevator, my nephew tells a great story, an elevator story. My nephew Justin, it's hilarious. I'm on an elevator and this 6-foot Black man is standing right behind me. If you say to yourself, I'm not feeling weird, and you're lying to yourself, you're not ready to even deal with this conversation. You're not ready to talk about it. You're not ready to do anything about it. And I tell companies, just don't waste my time. If you're not ready, when you're really ready to look at yourself and to look at how you have created your family dynamic, your family, I call it your family brand. And in there are biases that only parents can create. Children have none. we give them these biases. They don't have any. That's why they don't know in grade school, because they don't have them yet. So until you're ready to look at yourself and to accept the fact that you have these biases, and you say, okay, I have a bias about this, it doesn't hurt anyone. But the ones that can hurt, the ones that can stop you from learning and growing and living amongst other people that aren't like you, if you're going to deny yourself, then you're not ready. But if you're ready, you've already taken the first step, because now you can share your story. Hey, you guys, I used to be scared. I would see these big, black, tall men walking down the street, and I would clutch a purse and I would get scared. And one day I just went by and they just spoke to me. I spoke to them, and that was it. Try it.
So it's exposure to a large degree, and
It is.
and awareness and exposure, because you certainly don't want to be, you don't want to be putting yourself in danger, but I think that's a different feeling. I mean, we know that feeling, whether it doesn't matter what color
Well,
people
it's
are.
funny. I was in California, and I was speaking at some group, and everybody that took me to dinner was white women, and one woman, she was like, she'd never really been around me, a black woman, and we were having dinner and yucking it up, and she's like, oh my God, you're so much fun, and I don't have any black friends. I didn't even know that I could have a black friend, but I think I can now. I'm like, well, good, great for you. And she said, I just get really scared of black men. And I said, well, I said, why? And she's like, I don't know. I just associate black men with drugs and with guns. And I said, you know what's funny? I associate some white guys where I'm from with skateboards and colored hair as meth head tweakers. So I said, so we both have these biases, right? Right. So it's not so, but see, I'm the one that will still get out of the car and, you need some change, I'll give it to you. Because again, at the end of the day, we're all human. The people that we have these biases against, they have had hurts and pains and have been maybe socially unaccepted and have been created to be who they are. So we're just, in essence, we're continuing that pain and that path for that person that we have this bias about. And if you think about it that way, it's like, wow, I can either perpetuate or I can help.
That's great. And one last question is, let's talk a little bit about traditional business owner leadership model, and how are you driving them to accept change? I know you mentioned when they're ready, but they've got no choice but to be ready in today's.
They don't have any. Well, there are some that are begrudgingly changing. Change to me, it starts with in a company. It will start with your hiring practices. Who are you hiring? Are you redlining? Are you looking at an address and saying, oh, this person cannot be? All the things that we talked about. Is it just people from Brown? Are we allowing our recruiters to go to the HBCUs and the AUs and the Georgetowns and the Vassars and the Yales to get candidates, to get good qualified people to work in our companies? So it starts there. The second thing is, when we get there, let's now do some inclusive processes. So let's have the holiday calendar, and it be all holidays are for all ethnicities are viewed as important. So if we can take Christmas, we can take Yom Kippur off as well. If we can, you know what I mean? If we should be able to include Shiva. If it's I think it's Shiva 5 days or 7 days, 5 days, right?
Don't know.
5 days. We should say as an organization, it is okay that if this person is Jewish, they should be able to sit Shiva for however long they want. That's where it starts. And that's how we can include and feel included. So hiring and then making sure that you have practices that are inclusive practices. It's also good to probably form a DE&I committee And that committee would have oversight over these processes that you're going to either put in place or that are in place, and we just need to make sure that they're active and they're happening.
That's great. Well, it's very timely that you provided a lot of the insight that you did around not only recognizing bias, but learning to appreciate diversity and finding ways to be inclusive, because really that's what this whole effort that with behind Impact started out around. And so I couldn't be more pleased with how we sort of kicked this off, because you've given us a lot of content to now build on and ideas to share, because one of the ideas that I know that our program committee is working on is this whole idea about understanding the different celebrations that go on, and why, and what's the background behind them, and why is the custom the way it is, and how far back does it go. So that whole history and learning about different cultures and how people have evolved through the cultures over time, just to shed some light so it's not so scary, because I think everyone is afraid of the unknown, and if we can be mindful of learning more, it's not so scary anymore. So, so that's great.
And I would love to change the thought process or the paradigm from scary to inquisitive.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There are some amazing things. I went to Cuba, and I was so in love with the cultures of Cuba and what they how they pray and all their churches, and it was just beautiful. I spent some time in China and did the same thing. And I think that if we recognize that, and I guess for me, to me, it's a bit elitist to think that my way is the best way and the only way. My DNA is the best DNA and the only DNA that should count for anything. What I've been taught is the only thing that is real and that is truth, and that's it. That's a bit of an elitist stance, and closed-mindedness does not help you grow. And I think that we all want to know and learn and grow as much as we possibly can. I don't think that we should fear people that don't look, sound, act like us.
Well, I think that is a great closing comment for our time together tonight. And yes, we definitely need to be more open-minded, more welcoming, more curious, rather than being afraid of what's different. Let's go out and explore. Gee, how are we alike?
I can promise you it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So great. So just to wrap up, our next talk with Impact will be in October, and we're going to be talking about suffrage and other important voting related issues with the election coming up. And I also want to personally invite everyone on the call to consider joining our virtual group. Membership is open to anyone 18 or older, and dues are $30 a year. Our goal is that we believe that many hands make light work, and we embody the Arthur Ashe quote that start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can in your community service efforts. Virtual meetings are held monthly, 4th Thursday of the month at 6:15 for about an hour and 15 minutes, and the agenda is designed to connect our members with each other and with our communities at large. So we've got all sorts of project groups being created in alignment with member interests and various GFWC initiatives. So I really hope that you'll join us in thinking globally but acting locally. So thanks a bunch. You'll find us on Facebook. GFWC Impact is on Facebook, and we'll be continuing this series of conversations. So anything that you might have have an interest in, please shoot us a note as well, and we'll find someone who's qualified to educate us on it. So, like Dawn was tonight. Dawn, thank you so very much, and
Thank you for having me,
congratulations
Kitty.
again on your
Thank you.
magazine and recognition. And we appreciate you a bunch. And good luck to everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.